Good morning. No, good afternoon, that's right. My name is Dan Raftery, and I'll only be up here for just a brief introduction, and then I'm going to turn it over to Erica. Erica Suramani is head of Home and Garden at Euromonitor International. She's based out of Singapore and actually probably has as much jet lag as anybody does coming here today. She oversees the company's global research on the industry. She provides strategic insights on market trends, growth opportunities, and the competitive landscape all across housewares. I'm pretty sure that's why you're here. She's keenly interested in understanding key drivers and consumer behavior in the home and garden space, as you will hear today. This session kind of reminded me of the story of the fellow who walked into the bank to open an interest-free checking account, and the teller looked at him and said, "Who cares?" I'll let that sink in for a minute. Okay, so why did that remind me of that stupid story? Why does this remind me of that? Well, in the bank of data, the data banks around the world, Euromonitor is one of the biggest and best. The tellers are the analysts, the people that, like Erica, who will be providing you with insights that you won't get anywhere else. So please, let's give Erica Suramani a warm International Home and Houseware Show welcome.
Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to my keynote session. So today I'm going to be talking about digital disruption and how consumer trends are influencing retailers of tomorrow. So thank you very much for the introduction, and as Dan mentioned, my name is Erica Suramani and I'm the head of Home and Garden at Euromonitor International. So I've previously worked in New Zealand and Australia, and I'm currently based in Singapore. And in my current role, I've got global responsibility for the home and garden industry. And I provide thought leadership on how key trends like the smart home, urbanization, even demographic changes are really impacting the home and garden industry. So if you haven't actually heard of Euromonitor, you're not really familiar with us, we're a business intelligence company that focuses on consumer markets, and we have 15 offices around the world. So we provide data and insights across different industries, so including home and garden, retailing, and even consumer appliances in 210 countries. Through our Passport database, our clients have access to unique insights and analysis across industries and across geographies. So Euromonitor's home and garden coverage includes 4 key categories: homewares, home furnishings, home improvement, and gardening. Home and garden is a $1 trillion industry, of which homewares accounts for roughly $80 billion globally. Homewares is a dynamic category that is really ripe for change, especially given the ever-evolving digital climate that we find ourselves in. So during today's presentation, I'm going to cover 3 key areas. Firstly, I'm going to look at how hyperconnectivity is the new normal and identify some key characteristics of connected consumers. I'll also talk about digital disruption and how the shopping journey has been reinvented, and I'll profile some housewares retailers as well. Lastly, I'll talk about the smart home future, so what to expect and when. So when we think of housewares, we often just think about the product category. But housewares is about so many things. It's about cooking, it's about lifestyles, it's about entertaining our friends and family at home. It's also about the housing market and even health and wellness. We'd also be remiss if we didn't explore the impact of digitalization on the housewares category. And I think it's fair to say that home and garden has been somewhat slower to react to digitalization when we compare with other industries like consumer electronics or even apparel. But we're seeing changes now, and this has repercussions for housewares retailers and suppliers. So let's start today's session by taking a look at some key characteristics of connected consumers. So at Euromonitor, we've identified 8 key characteristics. So we've got digital democratization, the Internet of Everything, keeping it real, disruptors, changes to lifestyle, passive consumption, and then also consumer power and centricity. So I don't unfortunately have time to go through all of these today, but I will cover the vast majority. So keep these in mind as I run through the presentation as the key themes that we want to talk about. So let's begin with taking a look at digital democratization. So the number of internet users has more than doubled over the last decade, and this has given way to a truly mass participation in technology. Developed nations lead in internet access, and this is because many countries established home connectivity, over 2 decades ago. Digital connectivity in emerging markets, on the other hand, has been largely driven by mobile, and that's due to less costly networks and also the falling cost of devices. So I think this graph is a perfect illustration of digitalization. So it showcases the percentage of the population using the internet, and this is over a period of time. So it starts with the year 2000 and then moves to forecast figures in the year 2030. So you can see that in 2018, almost 48% of the world's population used the internet, and this is across both developed and developing countries as well. We expect this figure to climb to 76% in 2030. So when we think of different internet types, we have mobile broadband, so the kind of broadband that you would use on a device that's portable, versus home broadband, so the broadband that you would connect to in the home. So more than 50% of home broadband subscribers have an internet speed package above 100 megabits per second, and that's considered high-speed internet. So that's more than 50% of subscribers in 2018. And this is an increase from 2%, in 2013. So such a dramatic change over the last 5 years. Now, these are global numbers, right? But I want to give you an idea of some regional numbers so that you can understand how consumers are experiencing the internet in your own region. So this graph showcases home broadband penetration across different regions and then also across different years. So each of the columns represents 2013, 2018, and then also 2030. So we can see that Asia Pacific, Latin America, and the Middle East and Africa lag behind developed markets. We do expect all regions to see growth, though, over the next few years, and the percentage of home broadband subscribers to increase. But it's still North America, Western Europe, and Australasia that are going to lead the way. So we can see that already in 2018, 35%, just roughly 35% of the population in North America actually had access to home broadband. So keep this figure in mind. So what about internet speeds though? So in the case of high-speed internet, and I mentioned this 100 megabits per second is what we would consider high-speed internet. We see that Western Europe lags behind Asia Pacific, but North America and Asia Pacific at relatively similar levels. So developed markets tend to have a higher percentage of consumers connected to home broadband overall, but internet speeds may be a little bit slower. The good news is that by 2030, more than 60% of all home broadband subscribers are expected to have this high-speed broadband access. And Western Europe, Latin America, all of those regions will actually catch up to the developed regions of North America and then also the developing region of Asia Pacific. Okay, so we've talked about home broadband penetration, even internet speeds, but what about device usage? So while computers first brought the internet into the home, mobile in particular ushered in a borderless internet, giving more consumers instant access to anything, anywhere. Personal computers still tend to be more prevalent in developed regions like Western Europe and North America. And you can see that in North America, device usage is somewhat evenly spread between the different device options like PCs, laptops, smartphones, and tablets. So this actually reflects the availability of home broadband internet, and as well as the affordability of PCs in developed regions. So it's generally commonplace for most developed households to have access to a PC, but it's not necessarily the same for Asia Pacific. So lower levels of home broadband penetration make smartphones more popular and more prominent, and you can see there's quite a variation in the devices used in Asia Pacific. In 2018, more than half of all the households in India and Indonesia possessed a smartphone. However, home connectivity was much weaker, with less than 30% of households having home broadband internet access. So we don't expect home broadband access to rise significantly, but smartphone usage is expected to rise to 76% and 78% in India and Indonesia, respectively. So we're seeing, more than a 20 percentage point increase in those countries in a relatively short space of time. At the same time, penetration rates for mobile internet will also increase. So mobile connectivity becomes a major gateway for actually attracting consumers in developing markets to shop online. And this is especially given the slow development of home broadband. So consider that some markets in these developing regions just have issues with electrification in the first place, not to mention connecting to home broadband. When you see mobile penetration rates above 100%, so you can see that already in North America, or we will see that as well very clearly in the future, that means that consumers are actually accessing the internet on different devices. So not just a smartphone, not just a desktop, probably a laptop and a tablet as well. And that has ramifications for retailers and suppliers targeting consumers in that region. Whereas we see that in Asia Pacific, smartphones still happen to be the most predominant way to access the internet. Okay, so we've had a look at home broadband penetration, we've had a look at internet usage, but now I want to talk about another key characteristic of connected consumers, and that's how we're seeing lifestyles change. So connected consumers can summon a taxi, they can book a flight, they can order food, they can watch a film, they can even chat with their friends and family using connectivity. Thanks to smartphones, this connectivity is intertwined into their daily lives, and we see that smartphones are very rarely out of reach. So this graph on the right-hand side showcases how daily mobile activities have changed over time. So we've sourced this information from Euromonitor's lifestyle survey, and we're comparing two time periods, 2013 and 2017. So one key example is that over 50% of respondents used a mobile to send a text message back in 2013, but in 2017, less than 10% are doing that. So this ready access to content and services is in a way sort of spoiling consumers, and on demand becomes this catchphrase of this new generation. What's really interesting though is if you look further down the graph, still less than 10% of respondents are using their smartphone to buy products. And this goes a long way to explaining the relatively low online penetration that we see in consumer industries, and housewares is one of them. So let's take a look briefly at what would motivate a consumer to shop online. So the digital infrastructure in developing markets varies greatly from that in developed markets. However, consumers across the globe choose to shop online for three major reasons: best price, free shipping, and time savings. Consumers are also interested in being able to source a variety of brands, buy products that are not locally available, and then also have the freedom to order anytime, anywhere through online sales. Less important to online shoppers is the ability to achieve free returns and then also expedited shipping. In contrast, North American consumers choose to shop in store to try before they buy, to buy immediately, and then also to avoid paying shipping fees. For Asia Pacific consumers, the ability to source a good warranty ranks highly, and they also feel that stores are more trustworthy than online sales. So this is a real key point to think about if you're thinking about expanding into Asia or Asia Pacific region and considering the different motivations between North American consumers and then Asia Pacific consumers. So hyperconnectivity results in connected consumers. Connected consumers results in a whole host of different trends, and I've outlined a few of them here on this slide. So we see technology and internet access actually giving rise to demand for sustainable products and sustainable practices. So having access to more information about the brand or manufacturing capabilities of the companies that we buy from means that consumers want to know more about how they're dealing with environmental sustainability imperatives. So we see ethical living as a major growth area. At the same time, previously DIY consumers are also engaging the sharing economy. So an example would be TaskRabbit or Airtasker, and these gig economy startups help consumers do the tasks that they don't want to do. A good example is actually IKEA, who acquired TaskRabbit a few years ago, and IKEA's main business model revolves around consumers buying their furniture and putting it together themselves. But we see that consumers are less likely to want to do that these days. And so the acquisition of TaskRabbit really taps into that behavior. So we see the sharing economy actually helping to drive do-it-for-me behavior. And we see previously DIY consumers shifting to DIY, to do-it-for-me behavior as a result of the sharing economy. We also see that connected consumers is pushing us towards the smart home future. So I'm going to talk about that in the last third of this presentation. And lastly, we see the trend of shopping reinvented also arising as a result of connected consumers. And this is a term that Euromonitor has coined, and I'm going to talk about that in the next few slides. So one of the most direct links to connected consumers is the impact hyperconnectivity is having on the retail landscape. So the simplest way to describe this is digital disruption and how the shopping journey has been reinvented. So I'll discuss now how digitalization has actually impacted the path to purchase for consumers, and I'll take a look at how some housewares retailers are actually responding to this. So let's begin by taking a look at disruptors. Hyperconnectivity has disrupted virtually all consumer industries, and housewares is no exception. Disruption in one form has been the growth in online sales. So you can see this graph which actually plots homewares online sales penetration across different regions and then across two time periods, so 2017 and then forecast figures for 2022. So North America has the highest online sales penetration for homewares, and the region continues to outperform Asia Pacific in percentage terms, but no longer in sales actuals. And when we say homewares, we refer to tableware, cookware, kitchenware, and food storage. Small appliances, on the other hand, actually shows a different pattern. So when we look at small cooking appliances and we look in retail volume terms, Asia Pacific actually has the highest online sales penetration when compared with North America. So why do we see relatively low penetration for the homewares sector? And even when we compare homewares with other home and garden categories like home textiles and indoor furniture, homewares tends to be on the lower level. So there's clearly some barriers to online sales that still exist. So breakage may be a substantial concern for consumers and even for retailers who are wanting to sell tableware online. Maybe the same kind of concern doesn't exist for cookware manufacturers and then also for small appliance manufacturers. Despite these concerns, though, we see online sales having a massive opportunity in the future. So we expect that homewares online sales will grow by over $3 billion globally over the next 5 years. So connectivity has ushered in an unprecedented disruption, and this has hastened the rise and fall of businesses. When we think of disruptors, a few companies come to mind. So we can think of Uber, of Netflix, of Airbnb, but even of companies like Casper. So I'm guessing that most of you are really familiar with Casper, but for those of you who are not as familiar, Casper is an e-commerce mattress startup, and they've really disrupted the traditional path to purchase for buying a mattress. Typically, a consumer would go into a retail store, lie down on 10 to 15 beds, and then decide which mattress they wanted to take home. And Casper is a bed and box company, and there are numerous other companies that have arisen both in North America and overseas along the same lines. And there are a few parameters that make Casper really attractive to certain consumer segments. So this could be low price, but then also the convenience of having that mattress shipped to your door. So the case of Casper actually is very interesting because what it shows us is that well-established companies that have long histories are now susceptible to change. So connectivity has reshaped the economy, and consumers can access goods and services in a different way. Besides growth in online sales, digital disruption has fundamentally changed the shopping journey. And the next few slides will showcase this and show you some examples as well. So, under the umbrella term of Shopping Reinvented, we've got a few key themes that we can explore. And each of these themes can actually be organized into the pre-purchase, the purchase, and then the post-purchase stage of the consumer journey. So in the pre-purchase stage, we have experiential shopping, we have instant gratification, and personalization. In the purchase stage, we have blended store formats, value for money, and then seamless checkout. And then lastly, in the post-purchase stage, we have the last mile reimagined. So I don't have enough time, unfortunately, today to run through all of these key themes. But if you come and see me afterwards, I can share a business card with you, and you can download this presentation, which does go through all of these key themes. So let's take a look to start with experiential shopping. So experiential shopping is all about making the pre-purchase process less transactional. So it's not a new concept. So luxury retailers have been doing this for a number of years. But with the rise in omni-channel retailing, this means that retailers need to reevaluate how often and through what means they interact with their customers. The frontiers of experiential shopping are also being pushed further by technologies like augmented reality and virtual reality. So for those of you who are not as sure as to the difference between AR and VR, virtual reality refers to the generation of completely digital worlds, and these are typically accessed via an immersive headset and then sometimes hand controllers. Augmented reality, on the other hand, is a digital overlay that is used in conjunction with real-world items and places. Typically, augmented reality is accessed via a smartphone, and we've seen a number of home and garden retailers introduce augmented reality through their mobile apps, and examples would be Wayfair, IKEA, and even Ashley Furniture. So let's take a look at a quick example from the housewares segment. So Macy's introduced augmented reality to their mobile app in 2018, but the example I wanted to share with you was actually their in-store augmented reality and virtual reality in-store furniture experience. So it was originally developed as a pilot program and rolled out to 60 stores, and I think it will reach 90 stores very soon in the US. Now, what this entails is customers coming into the store and then using a tablet can actually outline the dimensions and the shape of a room that they want to design. They can sort of drag and drop items from the Macy's range in terms of furniture into this design. And then lastly, what they can do is, using a VR headset, actually interact with that design virtually. So it's still early days, right? We don't know what the outcome of this is, but right now, for me, what I can see is that it could potentially actually answer a question for a customer who's shopping for furniture. One of the key issues you might have is, will this product actually fit in my lounge? What's it actually going to look like with the paint color that I have right now? And how would it look in combination with other products that I'm keen on purchasing as well? So because it answers those questions, this may result in fewer product returns for Macy's in the long run. It also could help with inventory management and having the ability to actually stock more products that don't have to be physically in store, because consumers are interacting digitally through augmented reality and then virtual reality as well. So it's all well and good to say that augmented reality and virtual reality are really interesting technologies that can actually help retailers. But at the same time, they require substantial investment. So every retailer and supplier will need to undertake their own ROI calculations to see if they make operational sense and then also marketing sense as well. So the next key theme within Shopping Reinvented that I want to talk about and in the pre-purchase stage is instant gratification. So with information available at the touch of a button, consumers expect answers quickly and easily. Traditionally, instant gratification would take place within the store, and this would be after a consumer had purchased a product. But hyperconnectivity means that these days, consumers are looking for a service even before they've actually purchased a product. As a retailer or a supplier, if you can't engage consumers at the pre-purchase stage, then it's unlikely that consumers will proceed further along the buying journey. So another example, this time from housewares and specifically within the kitchenware segment, and a supplier example as opposed to a retailer example. So I'm sure everyone here is familiar with Swilling, and Swilling is a kitchen utensils and cookware brand that's known specifically for their range of kitchen knives. So recently, in a partnership with a brand agency, Swilling relaunched its US website. And the focus is now on the cooking experience as opposed to purely products. So they're repositioning themselves as a more cooking or a lifestyle brand, not simply a knife manufacturer. And that in this way, the company is really a good example of how they're trying to build brand awareness in the pre-purchase stage and trying to build brand loyalty and showcase their products and showcase their capabilities to consumers through their website. Okay, so the next key theme I want to talk about is personalization and also the use of big data. So companies are placing a larger focus on anticipating customer needs, and in order to do so requires research, and there's a growing interest in collecting real-time consumer data. Personalization therefore emerges as a new way to engage consumers and to build brand loyalty. The key takeaway here is that big data is increasingly crucial for companies wanting to understand their customers, and it's becoming a key part of the path to purchase. So let's take a look at an example from the housewares segment. So this is not a new example, but I like to share it because I feel that it's really pertinent and it gives an example of both personalization and the next key theme, which is blended store formats. So online sales penetration in China is high compared with other developing countries. And while this is the case, the majority of home and garden sales still take place offline, so that means via physical stores. So Alibaba, who owns Tmall and Taobao, we're all familiar with them, they launched their new retail strategy over maybe about 2 or 3 years ago. And through that initiative, they launched Home Times. And Home Times is really their offline foray into the homewares and home furnishing space. Now, Home Times was launched in 2017 in Hangzhou, China. The store itself is actually stocked with products that are sold by vendors active on Tmall. And it also the company uses consumer insights on Tmall users within an 8-kilometer radius of the store to actually stock those products and dictate the product range. So as such, the product range is based on big data, and this is really localization at its best. Because the store stocks exactly what consumers want, you may not have issues of inventory management, and then also you can reduce sourcing timeframes because you're using big data to collect this information. What's really interesting though is that consumers don't actually buy those products in store. What they're doing is scanning QR codes to buy online, and instead of it actually being an in-store purchase, it's still a digital purchase. And that's really interesting as we go into the understanding of what a blended store format is as well. Okay, so as consumers spend more and more time shopping online via digital devices, consumer expectations around engagement continue to rise. To meet these expectations, retailers have been experimenting, and not just with store design, but also integrating technology within the store. Several innovative methods are emerging, and this is to tailor the transaction to the product and also to the consumer. So we see new selling models arise, selling via social media or even social messaging, and we're even seeing pop-up stores. Another example would be direct-to-consumer companies like Casper introducing pop-up stores or coming in-store in large branded retail outlets to then engage with consumers. So this really reinforces the importance of the physical store, despite the fact that we're seeing so much digitalization in housewares and home and garden generally. So I'm going to share another example from China. So Chumei Home Furnishings entered into a partnership with JD.com, and JD is another one of China's leading e-commerce players. So together, these two companies launched a digital Chumei home store in Beijing last year. So the store, very similar to Alibaba's Home Times, sells homewares and home furnishings in a showroom format. And we see the digital is meeting physical in this store in that it uses virtual shelves, electronic price tags, and smart cameras. Very similar to Alibaba's new retail strategy, this is an example of JD.com's unbounded retail strategy, so the melding of both online and offline together. So these digital labels on products actually allow consumers to access information about an item and then to add it to their online shopping cart. So why is this partnership so important? Well, Chumei's business is purely offline, but this partnership allows Chumei to leverage off of JD's big data capabilities. So Chumei can then build customer profiles and match products with customer demand. And this has ramifications for North America, even though we're looking at a Chinese example, because we know that Walmart has a partnership with JD.com. We haven't seen quite yet how that will look, and the likelihood is that we'll see the first round of that innovation in the grocery channel, but over time, it's fair to assume that this will make its way into the homewares and home furnishing space as well in the US. Okay, so the last key theme that I'm going to talk about is value for money. So, due to economic realities in many countries, value is all about price. The economic recovery since the global financial crisis has been slow but steady in developed nations. In many countries, though, things have not become any better for the past 5 years. And people in those countries feel like they cannot afford much more than they could a few years ago. But for those who can afford it, for those that have experienced slightly better economic circumstances, value starts to encompass quality as well. And even where things have improved, we still have these memories from the global financial crisis, as well as the potential for future political or even financial concern. So seeking value in a way helps consumers hedge against the future. And for many, this means value means low prices. But at the same time, value also means looking for products that will last and that are made well. So this creates added pressure on retailers, so having to produce a product that is high quality, but then is also price competitive. So I want to share with you an example, and this one is Great Jones. And for those of you not as familiar, Great Jones is a startup that's based in New York, and it was established by two childhood friends. So this direct-to-consumer company sells cookware, so it's like saucepans and frying pans, and they use a variety of materials like enameled cast iron, stainless steel, and then even ceramics. So these cookware products come in a range of colors, and this is purely my opinion and not that of Euromonitor. They seem to have a slightly Le Creuset kind of feel to them, but on a budget. So the price point and the aesthetic really seem to target cost-conscious millennials who are still interested in cooking, but then also want really stylish cookware at the same time. So this brand story takes all of the functionality out of this product, and it focuses on cooking being an adventure. There's really strong brand imagery that we see across so many direct-to-consumer brands in the market today. So I bring this up because we see a number of direct-to-consumer companies arising in the home and garden industry. So previously, where we saw them mostly in home furnishings, like basically furniture companies, we're now seeing them enter the homeware space. So in cookware, in kitchenware, as well as tableware. So make no mistake, direct-to-consumer companies, they're after the millennial dollar, and they are vying for it quite competitively. So while they may not be market leaders, I still think we'd be remiss if we didn't take these into account when we consider the competitive landscape, especially for traditional and well-established brands. Okay, so I'm sort of rounding up to the last section of my presentation, and we're going to talk about the smart home future. So, the best way to talk about this is to talk about the insights and the understandings about the future of the smart home. So what should you expect and when should you expect it? So if we cast our minds back to the beginning of the session, I outlined a few of the key characteristics of connected consumers. So we've talked about digital democratization, we've talked about lifestyle changes and disruptors. I'm now going to take a look at the Internet of Everything and then passive consumption. So let's start with taking a look at the Internet of Everything. So the first wave of connectivity was driven by the arrival of computers in the home. The second was characterized by the arrival of the smartphone. And the next stage of connectivity has been dubbed the Internet of Things. This graph showcases smart device usage over 2 years, so 2015 and 2017. And again, this data has been sourced by our Euromonitor's lifestyle survey. Now you can see some clear trends coming about. The number of people owning a smartwatch has risen dramatically over those 2 years. You can see from a relatively small number of respondents to over 50% of respondents in 2017. At the same time, we see smart device usage shifting from laptops and desktops towards wearables and then also portable speakers. But if we look just further down the graph, second from the bottom, we see that the possession of smart home appliances has risen slightly over those 2 years, but still less than 10% of respondents say that they own a smart home appliances, and this has ramifications for houseware suppliers and retailers. So housewares manufacturers recognize the shift towards the smart home, and we're seeing more and more smart products hitting the shelves. In early 2019, consumer appliance manufacturer Bosch actually launched its IoT campaign, and the campaign is actually been called #LikeABosch. And I really encourage you to jump onto the Bosch website and have a look at these videos because they can be quite entertaining. And they showcase smart applications in the home. And they have taglines like, live like a Bosch, cook like a Bosch, mow the lawn like a Bosch, even park like a Bosch. So they're really showing the different ways in which the smart home is impacting different categories. So one of the products that they've showcased is the Mikey, and that's actually like a condensed version of, I think, My Kitchen Assistant or My Kitchen Robot. And they introduced this concept a few years ago at CES, and I don't think it's quite ready for rollout, but they're putting a lot of effort into promoting this product. So the Mikey can connect to, it's a kitchen robot assistant that sits on your countertop, and it's pictured here, and it can connect to other Bosch appliances, so your fridge, your dishwasher. But what's also interesting is that it's going to be Home Connect enabled when it's eventually launched. So that means when you use it, it will have the ability to actually talk to other devices or other appliances. So you might be thinking, like, what's the value add for the Mikey? Like, why would I use it? Well, say you're, cooking dinner and you want to have a chat with your mum at the same time, you can do so with the Mikey. At the same time, if you want to, try out a new recipe and you're looking at a YouTube clip, you can actually have the Mikey project that image onto the wall. Or same thing with talking to one of your friends while you're cooking dinner at the same time. So it has that functionality. So when we think about smart products, there are a few categories which come to mind. So I've just talked about consumer appliances, but we've also seen smart home development in categories like lighting and then gardening as well. So in lighting, think of smart lighting like Philips Hue, and then gardening in terms of watering and smart watering systems like sprinklers. But it's interesting to take a step back and consider, well, how prevalent are these products actually? And this graph showcases 3 different product categories in the consumer appliances space. So we've got microwaves, ovens, and then fridge freezers, and I've used a selection of markets to show you how this varies from market to market. So we can see that in 2018, 15% of the fridge freezers that were sold in Australia were connected. At the same time, less than 5% of the fridge freezers in Germany and France were connected. So there's some very clear distinctions between categories and then also countries. So even though we have developed markets, we don't expect and we don't actually see that connectivity is equal across these markets. And there's a variety of reasons for that. One of which could be home broadband connectivity, so the ability to connect to home broadband, and even high-speed internet packages and how likely it is for consumers to connect to those. So I want to also talk to you about a few other smart home products that we've seen, so aside from appliances, specific to the housewares segment. So first let's have a look at Tovala. So there are 2 components to the Tovala cooking solution. There's a smart oven and a meal subscription service. So if consumers are using the meal subscription service, they simply scan the meal barcode, and based on this barcode, the oven will then cook the meal to to make it edible. And this is based on some pre-programmed instructions that the oven has. However, what I learned recently is that LG actually announced that their own smart ovens will be able to recognize Tovala's meals. And so you can actually cook those meals in either a Tovala smart oven or even an LG smart oven if you had one of them. And you do that with the Tovala app. So functionality is key. Consumers are going to be thinking about, can I use this appliance only in isolation? Or can I use this appliance to connect to another appliance or another device as well? And if I can do this, this increases functionality and then it also broadens appeal. Another example is Heston Q in stoves. So I think Heston Q is actually being demoed at the show this year. So if you do see that out and about, I suggest you have a look and see what it's all about, because it's quite an interesting product. So we see this as being a bit of a hybrid product, both stovetop cookware and then also a consumer appliance. So it comprises of a smart frying pan and a smart induction cooktop that sits on your countertop. So it's a freestanding cooktop, not a built-in cooktop. And the Heston Q actually monitors cooking time and temperature. And you can sort of see it as being idiot-proof cooking. Using Bluetooth, the product actually connects to the Q app, and the Q app has, videos and recipes that consumers can use. And then it has sensors in the burner and then in the pan itself, and that's what allows you to enjoy precision cooking. And the trends that drive this product are very closely aligned with sous vide cooking, and we saw a lot of that being demonstrated at last year's show. So there are 2 components here. There's smart home tech in that consumers need to take that extra step by connecting their mobile app to, or connecting their smartphone to this app, and then doing the precision cooking through that means. So they'll be asking themselves, does the benefit outweigh the cost? So the benefit would be, if I'm not really sure how long I need to cook my steak for, perhaps using this app is going to give me that knowledge that I don't have. And in that way, the benefit will outweigh the cost. But every consumer will be thinking about that in evaluating whether or not this is a product that's going to add value to their lives. So the next example is actually from the food storage segment, so a little bit different to cookware and tableware. And OV Smarterware is less about the container and more about the smart tags and the clips that they use. So these smart tags and clips can be attached to leftovers, but they can also be attached to fresh food. So if you've got a bag of apples in your fridge or a bunch of carrots, you can attach the tag to those as well. So what these tags do is they allow you to track the useful life of your food products. And you can track this via the OV mobile app as well. And the functionality there is that if after work you're in the supermarket and you think, yeah, I think I'm going to have spaghetti bolognese tonight. I've got to cook spaghetti, but do I have any tomatoes? And you can check your OV mobile app and say, oh yes, I do. Are they okay? Yes, I've still got 2 or 3 days left of which they're still going to be okay to use. So one of the core tenets behind OV is actually to reduce food wastage. So they see that food wastage is a massive issue, and consumers have this lack of knowledge about whether or not products can still be used. And that's the key problem that they're trying to solve with these smart tags. So OV Smarterware is actually Alexa enabled, and this really links in well with the next topic which I want to talk about, which is passive consumption. So every day we're inundated with more news about Amazon Alexa or Google Assistant. Voice assistants are becoming commonplace in our daily lives and in the home. And as a result, we see passive consumption as a major growth area. So what do we mean by passive consumption? Well, volume sales for wireless speakers or smart speakers have continued to expand, and in 2018 more than 100 million units were sold. Initially, wireless speakers were the domain of Bluetooth speakers, but increasingly we're seeing this category being usurped by big tech companies using smart speakers to encourage the use of their voice assistants. So voice assistants, like I mentioned, were Amazon Alexa, Google Assistant, and even Xiaomi now has a voice assistant. So we know that Amazon Alexa can do a whole host of things, connect to smart lighting, to smart switches, smart locks, smart thermostats. It can even connect to your Sonos speakers, or if you have a Fitbit, and services such as Uber, Spotify. Alexa can even order you a Domino's pizza, right? So I think in time we're going to be asking ourselves, what can't Alexa do? And this has ramifications for houseware suppliers and retailers. So we see this transition from reactive to predictive. AI technology is increasingly enabling brands to move beyond recommendations towards anticipating customer needs. So there's this term anticipatory commerce that evolves and comes about. It's brand behavior that is really due to the fact that AI assistants have an unprecedented access to data. That's our data, your data. And passive consumption is therefore triggered by the IoT era, and it's going to change the way that consumers purchase certain types of goods and services. Now, at the same time, even though we see this shift towards passive consumption, there are still barriers to adopting smart home tech, and I've outlined a few of these in this diagram here. So firstly, how likely are homeowners versus renters to adopt smart home tech? So if you have a situation where you're renting an apartment and you want to use smart home tech, for example, smart lighting, you're probably less likely to use that if you know that you're going to leave that accommodation at some point. In the same way, even if you are a homeowner, what's the difference between you owning a new home versus being in an existing dwelling? So if you're in a new home, you may opt to install smart home tech, and we know that Amazon is working with home builders to really push this. But at the same time, if you're going to if you want to have smart home tech in your home and that requires professional installation, you're probably going to treat that as a barrier to you going down that path. Even when we set aside home ownership and we look at language, there are some difficulties in terms of smart home tech. Maybe not so much in North America, where the majority of consumers speak English, but then think of regions like Asia Pacific, where language is extremely diverse. So even in India, even though there are national languages, in many states there is a local language that's spoken. So if your voice assistant can't use the language that you use every day, that's going to impede your uptake of that smart home tech, and then also the use of a voice assistant. Lastly, there are also concerns regarding privacy and security. So we've seen a lot of information in headlines about how data is being used without our knowledge. So this is another barrier to consumers adopting smart home tech if they're worried that their data is going to be shared without their knowledge or to parties that they didn't initially intend to. So ultimately, I feel that consumers will be asking themselves, how badly do I need this product? How does this product, if it's a smart home product, help me in my daily life? And what value add does it really bring to my daily life? So I think there's been a lot of smart home noise at the moment, and I'd like to crystallize some key points to consider if you're a houseware supplier or a retailer, and the ramifications of what this means for the smart home. So housewares retailers and suppliers should be thinking about the connected kitchen and the different smart applications that this entails. So the graphic here showcases the connected kitchen activities and how they fall into different themes. So examples would be food preparation and cooking, but then also think about dishwashing and recycling of waste, and also the storage of food and drink products. Because of low adoption rates for connected appliances and the niche status of smart products within the houseware segment, most connected kitchens are non-integrated. And so what we mean by this is that connected products right now can only be controlled individually, so they don't actually talk to one another. But manufacturers of large appliances like Whirlpool and Samsung, they've been really driving integrated kitchen development. And that means where connected kitchen products are actually controlled via a single central management system. So what might the future of the connected kitchen look like? Okay, so hopefully you can see this illustration. And yes, I admit it's a somewhat crude illustration, but it can give you an idea of what the kitchen of 2040 might look like. So over time, with greater adoption of smart home tech, including AI voice assistants, we're going to see this transition from a connected to a smart kitchen. And as smart kitchen, these kitchens will be equipped with AI to control smart appliances with little or no human intervention. So let me just sort of tell a story about what we could see in this illustration. So we could have a drone that delivers ingredients to your home. And then your robotic assistant, which you can see on the left, carries those ingredients the final few feet into the kitchen. You have interfaces in the kitchen that regularly monitor the household's energy and water consumption, as well as the temperature and then security. You can also see that you'll have an indicator that tells you when products are low. So maybe you're running out of paper towels, or you need to reorder some apples, or even some surface care for wiping down your tabletops. And then lastly, even the humans in this scenario are monitored as well. So you can see there's a consumer reaching for an apple in the fridge, and they're being given information by the fridge that this is 10% of your daily requirements. Maybe that fridge is actually talking to the wearable tech that that consumer is wearing in the form of a smartwatch or a fitness tracker to actually showcase how that fits in with the rest of that consumer's day. So yes, this is a glimpse into the potential kitchen of the future, and maybe we'll get to that much faster than 2040. It's unlikely that we'll get to that next week or even next year, but it is coming. And I guess the key takeaway is, where does your product or where does your brand fit into this context? How will your customers shop for or use your product or brand when we think of the kitchen of the future looking like this? Okay, so I've come to the end of my presentation, but I've got a few key takeaways that I want to leave you with. Retailers and suppliers need to understand how their customers connect to the internet. So by what devices are they using mobile broadband or home broadband? Because this will really dictate how you interact with them. Low online conversion rates also reinforce the importance of the physical store. So we're seeing digitalization, we're seeing online sales increase, but at the same time, the store remains paramount to attracting consumers and for sales to take place. This really segues well into blended store formats and the use of augmented reality and virtual reality to provide experiential shopping for consumers. There's a really good upside here to using augmented reality and virtual reality technologies because that gives you access to user-generated content, and that is priceless. Imagine now that with Macy's in-store furniture experience, they are collecting data on how the lounges and the bedrooms and the bathrooms of their customers, what they look like. And that kind of information is not available anywhere else. You cannot buy that information. So it's really, in that way, quite priceless. This then also links to big data and personalization. So as a houseware supplier and a retailer, you need to know your audience. So the focus is shifting from looking outwards, where a lot of players would traditionally be looking at the competitive landscape, and now starts looking inwards, looking at your own customers and what their needs and wants are. So that means accessing real-time consumer data becomes crucial to understanding the path to purchase and to understanding your own customers. Lastly, the smart home adoption has been slow so far, but we expect that AI assistants will really fuel demand for the smart home over the foreseeable future. There are still some barriers to smart home adoption, like I talked about, so home ownership, privacy concerns, and even language barriers. But as I've demonstrated with the Kitchen of 2040, there's a lot of benefits to this integrated kitchen, or this move from connected to smart kitchens that we see. And as a homeware supplier or retailer, it's important to understand what those prospects really hold for you. Okay, thank you for joining my session. I hope that you found that there were some interesting tidbits for you, and I will love to share my presentation with you. So if you'd like to come up afterwards, I can swap a business card with you, and on the back of my business card there's a QR code which you can scan to then download the presentation. If you do see me around the show over the next few days, don't be shy. Please come and say hello. I'd love to have a chat. And yes, thank you very much. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. I've got some details on the slide which you can take a photo of, or just come and get a business card from me. So thank you very much.